Lawmakers is brought to you in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Lawmakers. I'm Mark McDonald. Oftentimes in the summertime, things slow down in Washington, and we're lucky enough to get visits from our senators and congressmen. Well, this year it's a little different. You might have noticed it's not slowed down in Washington, but we do get a visit anyway from U.S. Senator Dick Durbin of Springfield. And Senator Durbin, thank you. You happened to be here today because you were involved in a news conference involving the Affordable Care Act. And you and some hospital leaders, some other health leaders in the community wanted the community to know that what they had seen going on in the Republican-controlled Senate so far wasn't quite meeting their needs. What came up today?
It was a good press conference. We had the head of Memorial Medical Center, the head of St. John's Hospital, SIU School of Medicine, and a representative from the American Cancer Society. They all oppose what's been offered by the Republicans in Washington and tell us that it could be devastating to hospitals and patients in central Illinois. The measure that passed the U.S. House of Representatives would mean that 1 million people in Illinois would lose their health insurance. Let's take it down to the local level. 1,000 people in the city of Taylorville would lose their health insurance. And they tried to explain to us, when you make massive cuts in Medicaid programs, it really not only hurts the people who are served by that program, it hurts the hospitals. The people will still show up sick.
Sure.
They're going to get their care. Their costs will be passed on to everyone else. So it's better if you have some people paying health insurance through their health insurance. And so we're back in Washington. I cannot tell you what we will vote on in a few days because Senator McDonald hasn't told us. There have been no public hearings, no amendment process. He says he'll bring a bill to the floor. He'll let us know when we get back in town. That is no way to change 1/6 of the American economy on a measure that affects the health care of every American.
When you go back on, let's say, sometime next week, Monday, Tuesday, whenever that day is, you'll be asked to vote to open debate on a bill, not knowing what the bill is. Are they working over the weekend to try to narrow that down somewhat?
I assume they are. It's a one-way street. You know, recently the Republican leader, Senator McDonald, said, well, I think the Senate ought to stay extra time in August. I'm not opposed to staying. If people's health insurance, if that's at stake, then we should stay. But the interesting thing is, to this point, Senator McDonald has not invited us to any conversation about this. It has been done behind closed doors, strictly among Republican senators writing the bill. They have not invited, engaged, or even challenged Democrats to come up with an alternative. We're ready. We'd like to sit down with them. We think a bipartisan approach to solving this problem is the best.
Even on a casual encounter, you know your Republican Senate colleagues. You've been working with them for years. In many cases, you're friends with them. When you meet them in the hall or at lunch or something, you don't talk about it. It doesn't get discussed. You do. Okay, yeah. But not formally. You don't get invited. You don't get invited to caucus in any way.
We're talking about the most general aspects of the politics. We don't get into the substance, other than to say, I'll say to Senator Cassidy of Louisiana, who I talked to, Republican, medical doctor, we got to do something about the individual marketplace. Individuals buying health insurance. All the horror stories apply to 6% of the American people who get their health insurance through the marketplace. They're the ones that see the premium skyrocketing. They're the ones that have the complaints. Why don't we focus on that first? Let's solve that problem. He said I couldn't agree more. He's waiting for the Republican effort to come to an end so that the bipartisan effort might begin.
Would you agree that if nothing is done, the Affordable Care Act is history?
No, I don't. And I'll tell you, I think it could be hurt, because if a president doesn't support it, there are certain things the administration has the authority to send resources in to health insurance companies under the law. And if they decided, the Trump administration decided we're going to sabotage it, they could really do damage to it. The very first executive order issued by Donald Trump was to every agency in the federal government saying, do what you can to close down the Affordable Care Act. That is not the way to treat the health care system that affects millions of Americans.
We have now a paucity of insurance companies that want to be involved in the Affordable Care Act. Do you have a is there one thing that you could suggest that would get it off the sort of life support where it is right now?
Mark, what I did when we started this was I thought, well, let's find out what's going on in Central Illinois. What if I were to go to the marketplace today, living in Springfield? How many health insurance policies would I be offered? Well, the first thing I had to do was file all this information about myself, and I had to falsify my age. I'm over 65. I know that shocks your viewers. And so whenever I put my age in 65, they'd say, go to Medicare, go to Medicare.
Sure.
So I put a different age in and sent it out. I had 29 different health insurance policies I could buy in Central Illinois today. This notion that they're shutting down, they are in some places. Not the case here, at least not so far. And I might also add, members of Congress buy their health insurance through the marketplace. You know, we're in the marketplace ourselves. So having said that, what do you do about the places where they're down to one or none?
Right.
I think we ought to say that we have a public option available there. There ought to be like a Medicare managed care program, Medicare Plus, available everywhere that has the benefits of Medicare under the rules of Medicare, well-known doctors and hospitals all across the nation, that is available if nothing else is available. I think that would be the best backstop for these so-called bare counties without offers.
Okay. But that begs the question, Medicare itself is not being funded adequately into the future. So then we end up with another entitlement and another no way to pay for it.
Well, no. Now, I should have made that clear. It would not be part of the Medicare system. It would be a health insurance policy based on Medicare benefits. That's currently available. If you are 65 and older and you want to buy a Medicare Plus program insurance policy, you can. It complements basic Medicare services, but it's separate. It's a private health insurance plan that tries to mirror what Medicare offers.
Let's move on to something else. Next week, you're also going to have another interesting incident in the Senate. You're on the Judiciary Committee, which means you and your colleagues have invited Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort to appear to answer some questions. And I believe this is about a June 2016 meeting that those three individuals had with a Russian attorney. Is that going to happen?
I don't know. The actual invitation went to Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort. Mr. Kushner has not been invited yet. He is appearing before the Intelligence Committee staff this same next week. And I think it may happen. If it doesn't happen, Senator Grassley, Republican, Senator Feinstein, Democrat, have said they'll issue subpoenas. So I'm hoping it can be done on a cooperative basis.
Have you thought your questions through yet?
Been thinking about them because what's at stake here is a Foreign Agent Registration Act. If you are going to represent a foreign government and lobby in America, the law requires you to register. And the question is whether the Russian participants in that meeting did, and what the others who were in the meeting remember, what they saw happen, whether they're aware of whether anything was filed. It's a meeting which we've heard a little bit about, but we don't know what actually transpired.
Mm-hmm. What would concern you the most about what may have transpired? What do you, if you were to cook up a worst case scenario for Donald Trump Jr., what do you think might have happened?
Some collusion or coordination between the Trump presidential campaign and the Russians. We know the Russians were involved, and that's not a Democratic National Committee finding. It's the finding of our intelligence agencies. They attacked the voter file of the state of Illinois. We had to notify 80,000 voters in Illinois that their identification may have been compromised by the Russians back in July of the election year. And we weren't the only ones. Mm-hmm. And the question is, what did they do? We know they didn't change the votes. They didn't change the count of the votes. Mm-hmm. So we think the outcome was accurate. But what else did they do besides getting in and grabbing this personal information about voters? Mm-hmm. So I'd like to know if there was collusion or whatever. I don't start with the supposition there was, but initially the president and his people denied any type of meeting. Mm-hmm. Now that we've seen the emails, we know there's been at least one.
Now, on this Appropriations Committee, you also serve on the Defense Subcommittee of it. And I know that this is budget time, and I assume you've been in some appropriations meeting on this. You've also seen the House budget, probably gotten a look at the House budget. which calls for a rather large increase in defense spending and the war on terror spending. Where do you come down on that, and what are you considering in your appropriations?
Put it in context. We have something called the Budget Control Act. It limits the amount of money we can spend each year in either defense or non-defense. In order to increase defense to the levels requested by the President, or even higher levels requested by Senator McCain and the Authorization Committee, you need to change that underlying Budget Control Act. Otherwise, you can't do it. Legally cannot do it. If we change it, most of us say, let's increase defense spending. There are some areas where we should, certainly to protect us against terrorism. But let's also take a hard look at the non-defense side, the money we spend on education and training and medical research and infrastructure. Let's make sure that we're investing in America.
We've got a lot of hot spots right now. I mean, we have an Iran that aspires to be a nuclear power. We have a North Korea, which already is, if they can figure out how to deliver a nuclear warhead. The state of Hawaii today has started a program to notify the public if there's a nuclear attack from North Korea. They've got sirens. They're designing a siren system, and they're a public awareness system of public information. They say it could take 15 minutes for a warhead to get from North Korea to Hawaii. That's scary stuff. And with all these hotspots and China aggressively wanting to become the major player in the South China Sea by building islands, and I don't know. It looks to from my viewpoint, it looks like defense is going to be very, very important, and we have let it go.
We live in a dangerous world. The amount of money that we spend on defense, let me put it in perspective for you. They just had the head of the French military, a general, resign. He resigned because the new President Macron suggested a cut in defense spending for France. The cut was $683 million. The general resigned because he thought that was too deep a cut in the French military budget of $34 billion. 683 million, 34 billion. United States of America. $550 billion a year we spend on the military.
Right.
And the proposal is to increase it substantially. The president has suggested increasing it about $53 billion. John McCain said no, increase it $90 billion. But to put it in perspective, we spend more on defense than the next 5 nations in the world, including China combined. We are in places in the world where many countries don't go. We have the best military in the world, and we always want to have the very best military in the world that is providing our defense. What I hear from General Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, whom I voted for, I trust him, we need to put more money into readiness. We need to make sure that if we're called on in a split second, we're there, prepared for whatever's coming at us. So we've got to figure out how we're going to do this without shortchanging everything else in our budget that's needed for this economy to grow and create jobs.
What sort of an increase in defense spending could you get along with?
Well, I don't think it's unreasonable to talk about something like the president's number, which is $53 billion more. When you get beyond that, it gets a little tough to come up with the money. But I want to make sure more than just a number, it's a rationale. I said to General Mattis, you just went through your list, and I could have added 2 or 3 more to it about the most dangerous places in the world. And I said, wouldn't you not want to prepare the troops, prepare our technology, establish readiness based on the threat? The threat of North Korea is much different than the threat we face from ISIS. It's just a totally different war machine that's necessary to prepare for that. Go to Korea for a second. I was in Korea, a whirlwind tour over Memorial Day, something like 72 hours. I must have been crazy. I was in an airplane for 28 hours. I was out of the airplane for the rest of it and slept a few hours in between, and met with the new president, Moon, of Korea. We talked about North Korea, and it is dangerous. This man in North Korea is unstable and has nuclear weapons. And so you would think if the President Trump is calling members of Congress in to warn them about this danger, you would think on the ground in South Korea it's a pretty nervous population. Not so. After all of these years, they wanted to talk about the Olympics. We have the Olympics coming. And I thought to myself, I would be thinking about your neighbor night and day. I guess they've reached a point where they're not going to lose that much sleep over it, though they are prepared. We have 28,500 American troops there. They're risking their lives for South Korea, and hundreds of thousands of Americans who are there. The North Koreans not only are developing nuclear weapons, they have artillery, which has been in place for 30 years, that's 35 miles from Seoul, the capital of South Korea. They could obviously attack Seoul, even with nuclear weapons, instantly. We couldn't respond quickly enough to stop them. Just isn't in the cards. We're worried about the missiles, as in Hawaii, Los Angeles, wherever it happens to be. But that's the latest chapter. Here are the choices. They're terrible. Here are the choices. Acquiesce. Forget it. Don't worry about it. Unacceptable. Attack them. Well, as soon as we attack, the attack is launched against South Korea. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people die. Or find a way to negotiate or delegate. We've tried the last one. President Trump said, I'm counting on China to put the pressure on them. So far, no evidence that they're doing it.
No. Can you think of a psychological ploy with China, or an economic ploy, or some kind of a sanction that might convince them that, they're the pipeline for the modern world getting to North Korea. There's no other way for anything to get through there. What could we do to get them to work with us?
95% of all the exports of North Korea go into China. 90% of all their energy supply comes from China. China's in control of the situation. China is worried that the Korean Peninsula, if you look at a map, turns out to be totally U.S. dominated, right on their border. So the first assurance we have to give them is we don't want to own the Korean Peninsula. We just want to give the people some peace, allow it to be reunited, and end the nuclear threat. I think that's our goal. We never wanted to establish a 51st state. So what we need to do is to make that clear to China and work with them. But at this point, they're in the driver's seat and seem to be in no hurry to get to our destination.
I think Kim Jong, I think that's the one that we're dealing with now. I think he loves the worldwide attention. I get the feeling, and what we see of him is completely controlled, and whatever images I have of him are completely controlled by them. But it looks to me like he just loves being the burr under everybody's saddle. He just loves it.
He does, and he realizes with nuclear weapons he has the last word. He has us over a barrel. If you are prepared to die and prepared to sacrifice the people you represent, and you have nuclear weapons, we're back in the days of the Cold War, but the other side isn't worried about a counterattack. We have two nuclear powers facing one another, and one is prepared to give it all up. And that's the dilemma. And so when a new president comes in, and they all do, I'm going to change this, I'm going to fix this. Well, it takes a few months to realize there's a reason why the other presidents of both parties have been unable to fix it.
Now, you not only are a U.S. Senator, but you also happen to be a resident of the state of Illinois. And I'm sure you watched with interest what was going on during the budgeting and the special session. And I'll tell you, Senator, I've lived here 29, almost 30 years. And for the first 15 or 20, I really did. I could say the great state of Illinois, but I'm starting to wonder if this is a great state or not. We just don't seem to be able to function properly. What is your take on what we might be able to do to get the powers that be to realize that it's not all about them?
Well, I can tell you, I got into this business of public service, Congress, with one obvious goal, to make sure the people I represented had a better life when it was all over. Better opportunities for their kids to go to school, better opportunities for health care, an investment in infrastructure, bringing new businesses and new jobs. Well, what has happened to this state in the last 2.5 years has broken my heart. This budget crisis has hurt us in so many ways, particularly those of us downstate. I go down to Carbondale, it breaks my heart what they've been through. I mean, Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, it will take them a decade to get back on their feet and reestablish their reputation. Eastern, Western, Northern,
too,
and all across the state. The safety net has been shredded. It was disastrous. We underfunded pensions and overpromised in terms of pension benefits. And our Constitution, our courts tell us over and over, say clearly, you promised it, you pay it, period. So we're stuck with that obligation. We guessed wrong in terms of investments. Others did, but we did it big time, bigger than any other state. And that's at the heart of it. Then to go to 2.5 years without a budget, what just made it go from bad to worse. Now, the one thing I'll say is this, and I'm going to pick on a specific newspaper. I am so sick and tired of the Chicago Tribune printing another story about now why I'm leaving Illinois. You know, that sickens me. If they think that's their role, so be it. But I have a different view. I do believe this is a great state, and not to mention the great people who live in this state. But take a look at the diversity of our economy. Take a look at where we are in the world, smack dab in the middle of this great continental United States. Take a look at the fact that we have the number 2 or 3 airport in the United States. Take a look at all of that infrastructure. The potential is there. What we need is to turn this corner. I didn't like the budget agreement, some parts of it, but I commended those who voted for it. We had to put this crisis to an end. They've started. More has to be done, but they've started in the right direction. And I just want to do everything I can to get this state back on its feet.
You may have been or may not have been considering a run for the governorship before. You're kind of coy about it. Any second thoughts about it now?
Not at all. Not at all. And let me tell you why. I like what I'm doing. I'm in the Senate in a seniority position, which is helpful. In the leadership position, I kind of know how it works and how it doesn't work. And I think I can help our state. I thought about the governorship and taking off and trucking all over the state, but I decided that wasn't the right thing. Loretta and I thought this was the right thing to stay in the Senate.
I want to talk to you a little bit, we have a little bit of time left, about Senator John McCain, who we just found out this week is gravely ill, has an aggressive form of brain cancer. I don't know if you and John have a personal relationship or not, but your thoughts on what he's going through now and what his future might hold.
1982, I was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, and so was John McCain. So we were both freshman congressmen in that year and got to be friends. He did a cable TV show for me, The Brand New Congressman. Here he was, this war hero from Vietnam, former prisoner of war, well known to many. So we had a good, friendly relationship, and it's continued to this day. A few years ago, when we decided to write a comprehensive immigration reform bill, bipartisan bill, John McCain chaired it, and I was one of the 8 senators, 4 Dems, 4 Republicans, who sat down, worked together for 6-8 months. We wrote the bill, and we did it, and I'm darn proud of it. It's one of the most important things I've done in the United States Senate, passed the Senate 68-0. John McCain and I worked closely on it. He has one of these personalities where today it's Mount Vesuvius exploding. Tomorrow, smother you with kindness. You never know which John you get. But if you know that that's coming, it's okay. And I will tell you this, the love and respect that came out for him when this diagnosis was announced, really that he was going to fight this battle with cancer. You know, it's said that behind all the meanness and nasty words in politics, there are beating hearts and caring souls who know one another and care about one another. And I just hope it's a reminder to all of us to think a little bit about our mutual humanity.
Yeah, I think there are certain things that happen in our lives that bring us back to what's the most important.
Sure.
And one of the, they're life and death things. Or they're, if we lose somebody from our family, or things that remind us of the fact that what we do day to day is so unimportant compared to what we are.
That's exactly right.
And what I hear you saying is that John McCain is a good, respectable, honest man.
He is, and forget disagreements over politics. If I were in a pinch, in a hot spot, John McCain would be right there. I want to be there for him. I mean, and that shows you that despite everything you know about the Senate, there are some really deep and sincere friendships behind it.
Do you have any idea whether he'll be going back to work or when?
Nobody knows. He's 80 years old. This glioblastoma is the same thing that took Ted Kennedy's life. It's the same thing that Joe Biden's son passed away from. 14,000 a year, I understand, are diagnosed. I talked to the experts at the hospitals here. It's a pretty serious challenge of a cancer. But as I say, knowing tough old John McCain, if there's anybody giving a fight, he's the one.
Well, I mean, that 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton must have been absolute living hell. And so he's been through.
He's been through it. He faced, when we had an issue debating the issue of torture, right after 9/11, would we torture prisoners to stop the next act of terrorism? We were split up until John McCain stood up and said, "Here's what we're going to do." He said, "We're not going to be a nation that tortures. I know what torture is. I've been a victim of it." End of debate. The bill had over 90 votes. That's the kind of respect you bring to it, and his life experience, as tragic as it was and heroic as it was, really comes through to remind us who we are.
Next week, when you go back to Washington, you'll have two major things facing you. One will be a vote on the Senate's Health Care Act.
Right.
The other will be your maybe meeting with Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort. So it looks like a big week. You looking forward to it, or are you kind of dreading it?
No, I look forward to it, and I hope that the healthcare thing ends right. I mean, a lot of things can come and go, but I will tell you something, Mark. If you've ever been a father of a seriously sick child and didn't have health insurance, you'll never forget it as long as you live. I know, I've been there. I don't want anyone else to ever go through that. I'm going to fight like hell to protect the health insurance of the people I represent in this state. I don't care what your plan is for the next round of health care in America. If you're going to take health insurance away from 1 million people in Illinois, I'm going to fight you every step of the way.
Mm-hmm. And with the Appropriations Committee, you'll be hearing from Donald Jr. When do you know whether they're going to come in without subpoena?
We'll find out over the weekend.
And
if they decide not to come or need it postponed, and there could be some reason to postpone it, I'm sure we'll be accommodating. But sometime soon we're going to break for a few weeks in August, so get out of town when it's a good time to rest.
Yeah, okay. Senator Durbin, thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay. And thank you for watching this special edition of Lawmakers. See you next time.
Lawmakers is brought to you in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.